I'd like to welcome everybody this morning. My name is Jen. I'm with Central Jersey chapter. We cover Somerset, Hunterdon, and Middlesex. So this morning, Dr. Allison Block, is going to talk about your emotions in your business. Dr. Block is the Director of Health Psychology Center in Ocean Point, New Jersey, and her contact information is up on the screen, drallisonblock.com, and I'm sure she would love to hear from you if you would like to contact her. And so without further ado, I'm going to stop this and welcome Dr. Block. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to have you here this morning. And as Jane said, I'm a psychologist, and I'm going to talk about why psychology is important in your business. And you'll notice as I'm talking that I don't have any slides, and there's a reason for that. Often when there are slides, people are very busy reading or looking at the pictures or taking notes. And what I'd really like you to do today is just to listen and to think about how what I'm saying applies to you in your business. We're going to talk about how to manage your emotions and yourself when you're running a business. So I'll give you just a very brief background about me. I worked for 22 years in a very large corporation, 7,500 people. There were 300 division managers. Only 7 of us were women at that time. And then I went from that to running my own small business. And there certainly were challenges in making that transition. Today, I'm a psychologist. I do therapy. I also work at our local teaching hospital where I run a full year curriculum about managing emotions and dealing with the patients for young doctors. And I also work as an executive coach. So I pretty much, sort of cover a broad range of the types of people that I deal with. So what my hope is that as we talk today, and please feel free to type in questions. You don't have to wait till the end. I don't mind being interrupted usually. If you can take 1 or 2 things from today's seminar that you think will help you in your business, I will think that we've done a really good job. So let's start with why psychology is important in business. First of all, if we can't manage our emotions, we can't run a good business. And part of doing that is being aware of the stressors that are getting to us. What are our stressors? What are we aware of? So I made a list of a few, and what I'd like you to do is think about what are your individual stressors. For some of us, because of COVID, one of the stressors is loneliness. Another big stressor right now for a lot of people in business is financial stress. We're not making money at all, or we're not making as much money as we would have made, or we were trying to start a business and it's just not working out at this time. For some of us, it's failed productivity. We're not getting done what we want to get done because we can't be in person with people, okay? Some of us are feeling parental overload. It's very hard for people to be working from home in some cases and also managing their children and managing their children's education. For some people, they're kind of bored, okay? This isn't giving them the fulfillment that they need because of COVID. And for some people, there's grief. I mean, there are people who have lost loved ones during this period of time. So I would ask you to think about what are your stressors? What are the things that are getting to you right now? One of the challenges in dealing with emotions is how do we maintain our motivation during difficult times? And when we're stressed and things aren't going exactly right, maintaining motivation is a challenge. So let's talk about that first. For many people, the isolation of COVID has been a problem in terms of maintaining motivation. And so when we have that kind of isolation, people often do one of 2 things. They either act out or they withdraw. The problem with withdrawing is that you don't engage with others and you don't get the feedback that you need, and you can't do the kind of work you want to do emotionally. The other thing is that when we withdraw, we're not communicating. And so we don't have the help that we need in managing our emotions. So there are a couple of things to think about in terms of maintaining motivation. We all still have tasks to do, whether they're related to our business, for many of us, or whether there are also tasks related to our home life. So the first thing is to take really big goals and divide it down into smaller goals. So if you're writing a business plan, or if you're learning a new financial program, anything like that, instead of saying, oh, I've got to write this business plan today, breaking it down and saying, I have to do part 1 today, and I have to do part 2 in 2 more days, etc. So breaking these big, overwhelming goals that make us feel out of control and overwhelmed into smaller groups of things that we want to do. The other thing we need to do is take a little tip from the Buddhists and cut ourselves a break. These are not normal times. With the stresses of the political environment and the stresses of COVID, sometimes we have to be a little kinder to ourselves and not ask as much of ourselves. And for those of us in business who set very high bars for ourselves, sometimes we need to cut back just a little bit, give ourselves a bit of a break. We also need, Jane and I were talking before the seminar, and we were talking about people who want to be in control. And often people can be very perfectionistic. And being perfectionistic can get in the way of staying motivated because you have to do it and then do it again and then do it again, and it still doesn't seem right. There's a point at which you have to say, my trying to make it better isn't improving my product or my service, and let go of a feeling of perfectionism. And the other thing is to create small rewards for yourself when you complete tasks. Obviously, in the business that I'm in, I love talking to people. There's a certain part of my business that I don't like, and that is writing reports. So what I do is I say to myself, if I can write the first draft of that report, then I can sit and read a novel for a half an hour. I love to read. So reading that novel is called, it's the reward for my having completed that first draft. And the name for that is something called the Premack principle. I'll tell it to you in shrinky terms first. The Premack principle says you always do the low probability act before the high probability act. And then the high probability act becomes the reward for having completed the low probability act. So those are all really big, complicated words. What we're really talking about, for those of you who are parents, you say to your kids, do your homework, then you can go out and play. Doing homework is a low probability act. You want to finish that before the child goes out to play. But even for ourselves, we can create these small rewards, and rewards are a way of maintaining our motivation. The other thing we need to do in business is learn to manage our negative emotions. And we're going to talk a lot about that, about how to figure out what our emotions are and what our thoughts are. I am a cognitive behavioral therapist. So cognitive therapists do not just look at how you feel. We also look at what you think. Because in fact, our thoughts are what cause our emotions. Let me give you an example that I think will help sort of cement that in your mind. Imagine that you're walking down the street and coming toward you is someone that you met at a networking event, or it could be a potential client that perhaps you only met with once very briefly. And as they come toward you, that person turns his or her head to the side and passes by without saying hello. And you say to yourself, oh, that poor guy, he probably forgot my name and he was too embarrassed to say hello. That's scenario 1. Now let's look at scenario 2. In scenario 2, you're walking down the street, the person is coming toward you. He or she turns their head to the side and doesn't say hello. And you just say to yourself, that snob, he couldn't be bothered saying hello to me. And you feel angry and hurt. Why do I want you to remember these 2 scenarios? When people come into my office, they often attribute their emotions to the situation. So the person who's feeling angry and hurt might say, someone I know snubbed me on the street today and I'm really pissed off about it. But if you think about scenario 1 and scenario 2, the situations were identical. What was different was how the person interpreted the situation. Our thoughts are the way we give meaning to the events in our world. So we need not only to manage our negative emotions, but we need to manage our thoughts to understand where our emotions come from. Okay? And we can't change our negative emotions if we don't learn to capture those thoughts and look at them and see if they're accurate. In order to do that, we have some work that we need to do. So I want to talk to you about how you can figure out what's going on for you. I joke with my clients and I say, you can get better, BETA. So what does BETA stand for? It stands for body. What's going on with your body? Are you having headaches? Are you having stomach aches? Are you tense all the time? Does your back hurt? Do your shoulders hurt? That type of thing. So that's the B in beta. What's going on for you emotionally? And do you have a good enough emotional vocabulary to name those emotions? What I mean by that is, can you distinguish between I'm a little concerned, to I'm nervous, to I'm worried, to I'm overwhelmed, to I'm agitated? Having a good emotional vocabulary will help you to figure out what's going on for you. Because emotions don't come just in vanilla. They come in all different varieties of flavors. So that's the E in beta. And here comes the important part. What are you thinking? That's often something we don't pay attention to. We tend in this country to be very feeling oriented. And we're very aware of how we feel. But we're not very good at capturing our thoughts. So that's the T in beta. What I would suggest for you is that when you are experiencing a negative emotion, stop yourself. Say, what is the emotion? Even write it down. And then say, well, what's the situation I'm in? Okay. Someone who works for me isn't doing their job properly. And then the important part, what am I thinking? So for example, if your thought is, she never does the job correctly, is that an accurate thought? Or does she often do the job correctly, but right now she's not doing the job correctly? You can't fix what may be your annoyance or your disappointment without understanding what you're thinking and clarifying what you're thinking and making sure that your thought is accurate. And then there's a process that goes on in terms of changing our thoughts. We're not going to go into that today. And then what are you doing? If in fact you're tense, you're upset and annoyed because someone's not doing their job properly, and you're thinking, she never does the job right, what are you doing? Are you pacing your office? Are you confronting the situation? What are the actions you're taking? So the actions are the A in beta. So we have body, emotion, thought, and action. So I want to stop briefly at this point and ask if anyone has any questions about that or would like to mention. Jane, if there are any questions, of course, please pipe up. Or if there's anyone who wants to talk about what they think their stressors are. Anything like that going on? Okay.
I don't have any specific questions right now.
Okay.
So give an example of some stressors that you might think of to help people kind of think this through.
Well, we have a lot of stressors going on right now that are related to COVID, things like loneliness and financial stress. But there are other stressors. The stress, what I say to people is when we want to talk about emotions, we need to use a word that is an emotion. Am I frustrated? Am I angry? Am I sad? Am I annoyed? The stressors are the situations that lead to those emotions. So it could be being annoyed at an employee. It could be having a problem with a child. It could be not being able to pay the bills. Okay. It could be struggling to put together a business plan. It could be not being able to hire enough employees or not having money to pay employees. Stressors can run the whole gamut of anyone's individual experiences. That's why I was wondering if anyone who's listening might like to share any stressors that they have had recently, either personally or related to their business. Okay, does that help? Okay.
I think that helped. And I have someone, hold on just one.
Okay, I see here the feeling that things will never change as a result of being isolated due to COVID is leading to a loss of motivation. So let's look at the BETA of that statement, okay? So things will never change isn't actually a feeling. Things will never change is actually a thought. So that's great that you have, this is from Barbara. Barbara, that's great that you have identified the thought. So the question I would have is, what's the feeling that's going with that? Are you sad? Are you depressed? You're saying it's the action is a loss of motivation. What is the emotion? So that's the first thing you want to do, is look at the emotion, look at the thought. What is the situation? Okay. And then you have to look at the thought and say, is it true that things will never change? One of the challenges right now, and one of the things causing a lot of anxiety for people, is uncertainty. And uncertainty is one of those emotions one of those situations that is very, very difficult. Actually, that is what anxiety often is. Anxiety is fear of uncertainty. And it sounds like that's one of the things that's going on right now. So if you were sitting with me in my office, I would probably be talking to you about, are there ways that you can reach out? Are there ways that you can mitigate that isolation, feel more connected to people? Okay. So you're feeling not anxiety, but depression and a loss of control. Okay. So I think trying to change the feeling of isolation might be a way to see whether or not you can believe that things would change. Okay, does that help?
I don't have any no comment there yet.
I think I see a yes. Okay. All right.
Got a yes. Okay.
Okay, so let's keep going. Let's talk about, again, some of the techniques. I want to talk to you about how you change what you think. Okay, because if we change what we think, we can change the way we're feeling. So let's go back to our example of the guy who got snubbed on the street and he's angry and hurt. Okay, and he says to himself, he can't be bothered to say hello to me. We don't know that that's true. So we have to examine that thought and examine the evidence for the thought. Same with the employer who has the employee who's under functioning and says, she never does anything right. Okay. Do we know that those words are accurate? So we have to examine the evidence, and we call this process of identifying what you're thinking and then examining the evidence and then rewriting your thought, all of which are a prelude to feeling better. We call that cognitive restructuring. So let's think about the guy who said he couldn't be bothered to say hello to me. I might say, well, do you know him well? Is he a kind of guy who typically can't be bothered with people and snubs people? No, I don't know him well. Then I might say, well, have you ever done anything that might have been unkind to him or rude to him? No, I only met him once. Can you say for sure that maybe he's not having a personal problem today and he's lost in his own thoughts and that's why he didn't want to say hello? No, I can't say that for sure. So what is the probability that this person deliberately snubbed you? Okay, this potential client or this person you met at a networking meeting, what's the probability of that? And the person might say, well, the probability is probably not that high. So maybe I have to let go of, he snubbed me on purpose. Well, if I can let go of the thought that he snubbed me on purpose, I can change the feeling of being hurt and being anxious. So there's a process that you can go through there. Now, that's a pretty common thing that we work on in terms of managing emotions, okay? Managing how we feel, managing what we're thinking, and changing the way we feel and the way we're behaving. Sometimes that is too hard for people. And there is a school of thought in a type of cognitive behavioral therapy, let's call it, which is called acceptance and commitment therapy. And acceptance and commitment therapy says, you don't have to change how you're thinking. If that's too hard for you, you can live with that, even if it's making you anxious or if it's making you depressed, okay? But you have to accept also that these are just feelings. This may not be reality. You have to look at how you may overreact. You have to try to defuse problematic thoughts and feelings. And the way you do that is you pay attention to them, you notice them, you name them, you think about them, and then you accept them. But you still need to act in a way that's consistent with your personal goals. So let's say you're now back at your business and you're still stewing over the fact that this person snubbed you. You have to say to yourself, my anger and my hurt are just feelings. Okay, they're not necessarily reality. And what are my personal values? One of my personal values might be productivity. I need to accomplish certain things today. So I still have to move forward. I have to set those feelings aside temporarily, and I have to move forward and do the work that I need to do instead of stewing over what this person may or may not have meant when they didn't say hello to me. So that's one of the techniques that comes out of acceptance and commitment therapy. For a lot of people, it's very effective when they have to learn to live with anxiety, to live with uncertainty, okay? And often what happens with people is they develop anticipatory anxiety. They're worried that something may not go right in their business, okay? Product may not come in. People may not do their job. Costs may overrun. And what may happen is that the anticipatory anxiety can become worse than the actual situation itself. So it's very important to be aware of anticipatory anxiety and what the thoughts are about that. You know, product isn't going to come in on time. That's a thought. Do we know that for a fact? Let's examine the evidence. You know, of all the times that I've had product come in, how often has it been late? That type of thing can be very important in teaching us how to look at our thoughts and look at our feelings and see how we can manage them in the context of our business. There's one other thing that I think is incredibly helpful. I mean, I teach my clients relaxation techniques to deal with stressors. I teach my clients imagery and visualization. And I'm sure you've all heard this next word, and that next word is mindfulness. Mindfulness has become the buzzword of the last 5 years. But in fact, mindfulness can be very important. Mindfulness is a non-judgmental awareness of what's going on for us physically, of what's going on for us emotionally, and what's going on in the environment around us. It's the ability to stop and pay attention to where we are. And often mindfulness helps to anchor us. If we're feeling upset, we can be mindful of the environment. If we get really stressed when a certain deadline is approaching, we can be mindful of the things around us. And being mindful can help. There are books and courses and a million things written on mindfulness, but it can be very, very helpful to be aware of our present experience and not just let our emotions run away with us and sort of overwhelm us, okay? So any other questions at this point before I go on?
I don't see any questions in here or even in the chat. Does anybody have any? One of the things I was thinking about, and I've talked to people about this as well, and it all goes back to COVID. I think COVID is causing a lot of stress for everybody, is the up and down of it. there was a release a little bit in the summer when the weather was good and we were outside and doing some things. And now, it's increasing again. So now it's kind of down, and then there's a vaccine, but the vaccine. So it seems like there's like good news, bad news, good news, bad news. It's kind of the up and downs of it that are frustrating.
Well, I think COVID is sort of a perfect storm example of what we mean when we talk about anxiety about uncertainty. A, we didn't cause it. B, we can't control it. And C, we don't know when the end is in sight. So we have to figure out what COVID is doing to us emotionally. One person, I think it was Barbara, was talking about feeling isolated and feeling like she didn't have control and maybe having some depression. Other people are very anxious about getting it. I have someone that I know who has not left her house since March. Okay, she's got what I consider to be almost like PTSD related to acquiring the virus. Okay, she can't bring herself, even in the summer when the weather was good and a lot of us were meeting outside, with masks and socially distanced and all of that. She can't bring herself to do that. So I think COVID is one of those situations that, and I think there it's because of the isolation. And let me talk about isolation for a minute. I think it's important to try to not wait for other people to come to us when we're feeling isolated, but to reach out to others, whether it's making phone calls or sending emails or doing Zoom meetings with friends and family. Okay. I think that whatever connections we can make, there are also so many events and things that are taking place online. I will grant you, they are no substitute for seeing the faces of those we love. They're no substitute for a hug. They're really no substitute for sharing a meal. But I think maintaining whatever threads of engagement and connection we have with other people can be very important in managing our emotions. Okay. So I want to move on now and talk about. Yes, go ahead.
Someone does have a question here,
Sure.
or it's a comment looking for some help on helping stay calm. I feel like a tsunami, earthquake, and a hurricane hit me all at once. She was planning to go overseas for a new project. She needs a coronavirus test 72 hours before departing, and that turned out to be impossible to do. Her best friend passed away. Adopted mother passed away, and she was waiting to get tested for the coronavirus, and then she wasn't able to receive that test. So she's not able to travel, lost the sponsorship, and it has lack of funds right now. So that is a lot. It sounds like a lot of earthquake and tsunami. How do you keep yourself calm? How can you calm yourself down during these kinds of things?
Well, I think it is really a challenge. First of all, when we lose people during COVID and we're not able to have the normal traditions and grieve the way we wish to grieve, we don't get the closure that we want. So that is certainly an issue. I don't know when this happened. I know that COVID tests are certainly much more available right now. In fact, my husband was just looking online the other day. We were looking for places that offer the rapid test. Okay, so that because he needs to have a rapid test before he has a medical procedure. And of course, the lack of funds, not being able to do the project. I think that it is sometimes helpful to find a way to tell yourself that things will change, that this will get resolved at some point. With regard to the project, and I don't know what the project is, I would wonder whether there's anything you can do for that project that could be done distantly, virtually, because certain countries in Europe are not letting Americans in. And, that could be problematic as well. But is there any way to maintain those connections that had to do with that project? Okay. And I think it's very hard. We have a lot of people who have really felt just bowled over by everything that has happened during this period of time. But I think also this maybe goes back to this sort of Buddhist mentality of giving yourself a break. You are entitled to feel down. You're entitled to feel sad. And I think allowing yourself to feel these things, not feeling like you shouldn't feel that way. Okay. Sometimes what's helpful for some of my clients when they're struggling with big situations, with big negative emotions, and they feel like they can't get past them, I'll say to them, why don't you give yourself 5 or 10 minutes every hour to just sort of feel the emotions, wallow in the emotions, and then say, okay, my time is up. Let me go do something. Even if it's something as minor as cleaning out a closet, okay, or answering your email, something like that. And try to normalize the remains of the hour. And then in the next hour, you can feel those feelings again, and then try to be busy. I also sometimes will suggest to people that they put a list of small tasks in a jar, because sometimes distraction can help. And then when they're feeling like they just can't handle these feelings anymore, stick your hand in the jar, pull out the small task. Maybe you're going to sweep the garage floor. Whatever comes out of the jar is what you're going to do, because often distraction makes a difference. And the other thing would be to change your environment. A change of environment can also really help with a change of feelings. Sometimes it's nothing more than going out for a walk on a sunny day. Sometimes where I live in Monmouth County, I can take a ride to the boardwalk and sit and look at the ocean. There are shopping centers that are open, just wandering around and looking in store windows, perhaps. So just a change of environment sometimes can help to lessen the feeling of being overwhelmed. So I hope that helps.
Good suggestions. Okay, I think that's what we have right now. So yeah, go ahead. Before I interrupted you, or you were going on to another.
Okay. So what I want to talk about is resilience. In times like these, and these are tough times, but at any time when we're running our own businesses, it's very important to be resilient. So let's talk about what resilience is. I want to say that when I was in graduate school and writing my dissertation, I did my dissertation on something called hardiness. Okay. Hardiness was the old term for resilience. And what it is basically is the ability to bounce back. Okay. It's the key. Resilience is really the key to functioning well in difficult times. And you can learn it. It's not something you're born with. You can learn to be resilient. So what is it? I said it's the ability to bounce back. Nelson Mandela had a great quote. He said, "Do not judge me by my success. Judge me by how many times I fell down and then got up." So resilience is the ability to recover both mentally and emotionally from stressful events and try to go back to our pre-crisis functioning if we were functioning well before. And it's an ability to hang on to our personal strengths as we go into the post-crisis mode. So we talk about the 5 C's of resilience, and I want to go through those with you now. So the first one is connection, okay? And this is a biggie during COVID time because so many people are feeling isolated and are feeling overwhelmed by everything that has gone wrong or the things they've lost. Connection means having good relationships. It means being involved in a community. It means internalizing a sense of connectedness. So today, in fact, Jane and I were talking today about the fact that we have so much that's a virtual connection today. Thank God for the technology, or we'd all really feel isolated. But sometimes we need a more personal connection. Even I have one friend, she drives somewhere, her friend meets her, they meet halfway, and they sit in their cars and they sit and talk because they find that more satisfying than doing the virtual thing. Okay, so trying to create a sense of connectedness, doing things that enable you to be more connected. So connection is very important to be resilient. We actually know that people who are less connected, who are less resilient in that way, are actually more likely to get sick and more likely to be depressed. Okay, so that connectedness is very, very important. The second C is communication. Okay, the ability to share what's going on, like the person who just shared that tsunami and tornado and hurricane of stuff that happened to her, to share what's going on and to try to reframe what happened, okay, and to develop some insight about it and try to have good judgment about how you're going to handle it. So the important thing I think about communication is that when we communicate with others, when we share what's going on with us, when we have a back and forth, whether it's with a friend or a family member or a mentor or a colleague or a therapist, it gives us that dialogue that enables us to have some different judgment about what's going on, to develop some insight about how we're reacting to it. So that communication is really important in terms of being resilient. The third C is confidence, okay? Now, confidence doesn't mean that you think you can do anything and do it well. Confidence means having a realistic view of yourself and what your strengths and your weaknesses are, because then you know when you need to ask for help. So for anyone who has come to SCORE and has asked for a mentor and is looking for help with their business, you already have the confidence to know that there are areas where you're not an expert and you need someone to assist you to make things happen. So confidence is an accurate sense of who we are and our strengths, our weaknesses, our abilities. And the other thing that's important in confidence is to recognize what we have learned after a problem is resolved and still be able to visualize what our goals are and to believe that we can influence the way things work out. People who are resilient really believe that they can change things. I don't mean change things unrealistically, but they're able to take a situation and find a small portion of it where their own efforts can make a difference. And that comes from having the confidence to do that. The fourth C is competence and commitment. We used to call it, it used to have a different name, but competence and commitment. And that means being able to look at the big picture, okay, and to problem solve and to follow through. Sometimes when we're not as resilient as we would like to be, we get stuck. Our emotions get us stuck and we can't seem to finish. We can't follow through. We start problem solving, we get overwhelmed by our emotions and we quit. And so competence and commitment, okay, are really the ability to stick with something, excuse me, and the grit to follow through and to kind of stay with it. And the fifth C is control. Control means being able to being able to manage your strong emotions and not let them overwhelm the process of problem solving. So in order to be resilient, we have to have what they call a growth mindset. We have to believe that we can learn and that we can grow and we can change. So often what I suggest to people is that you make a list of your strengths. I always start with strengths. I always start with the positive. And really think about it. What are your strengths? And put that list somewhere where you're going to see it every day. Okay, now, for me, where I would put it to see it every day would be in my underwear drawer. You can choose to put it wherever you will see it every day. But reminding yourself that you have strengths can be important. Once you have done that for a while, and when you want to change the way you see yourself, I wouldn't say make a list of your weaknesses. I don't like that word. But I would say make a list of the things that you would like to be able to do better. Put them on a piece of paper. That putting it on a piece of paper is part of that commitment, okay? and identify one thing that you think you can work on, one thing that you think that you can do better. Okay? One area where you still have the ability to improve your business or to grow your business or to change your business. So these techniques work not only for business, they work for employees in business who are trying to do better in their careers. They work as well for bosses and owners who want to change the way a business is running. And obviously, they also apply personally. So making that list and looking at it every day. So I want to finish by talking about what are some of the key habits of people? Excuse me, I'm going to stick a cough drop in my mouth because I'm going to cough again. What are some of the habits of people who are emotionally resilient? One is to confront rather than avoid your fears. Don't let something that's bothering you be shoved in a drawer, euphemistically speaking, don't stick it in the back of your brain. Figure out how you're going to confront it. The other is that people who are resilient tend to act quickly. They go through the facts they have, they make decisions, and they act quickly because they don't want to be in an emotional uproar. And then once they do that, they don't beat themselves up about the decision they made. They move on. They accept their anxiety when change is not likely. They say, okay, this is the way it is. Things aren't going to change. I need to accept that. They learn to overcome their anger. And we do that using the BETA and the cognitive restructuring, understanding what the situation is, what we're thinking, what we're feeling. They deal with sadness, okay? They listen and speak mindfully. So what do I mean by that? They pay attention to how they are speaking to others. They pay attention when they are listening. They listen carefully and thoughtfully and mindfully. And most importantly, they target what they can control. They reset their perspective. They focus in on those things that they can do something about. And there is a little technique called the stop technique, where you can focus on a single thing, perhaps even a single thought, okay? And you just try to focus on that one thing and say, what can I do about this? So that can really make a difference, okay? Being resilient, being able to bounce back is not an end game. It's not something where we come up with sort of quick fixes and that's it. Being resilient is something that goes on, I think, continually, working on being resilient. The idea of having grit, sticking with something, and eventually, as you become more resilient, that becomes your norm. There was a wonderful quote by Elizabeth Edwards, and she said, "She stood in the storm, and when the wind did not blow her way, she adjusted her sails." And that is indeed the definition of resilience. When things aren't going your way, you have to adjust your sails and readjust priorities and goals and manage your emotions so that you can get to those goals. I want to talk a little bit about anxiety because there is so much collective anxiety right now. I think one of the issues in dealing with anxiety is people tend to see it as they believe that it's intolerable, they believe that it's interminable, and they believe that it's dangerous. Anxiety is not in and of itself dangerous, okay? It just feels bad. It can feel awful. If you have panic attacks, it can feel awful. But people can live with anxiety. They can learn to push it aside a little and still do what they need to do in their businesses. So my message, I think, today is to do what you have to do in spite of anxiety, in spite of depression, in spite of isolation, and learn to be self-compassionate, okay? Practice mindfulness and be kind, not just to others, but be kind to yourself, because I think right now people are being very hard on themselves. And I think being kind to yourself can make a big difference. So that's all I have for you today. I'd be happy to answer some questions if there are any, or take comments.
I don't see any questions, but I had a thought about a lot. I know when we're seeing clients now, a lot of people are overwhelmed with a lot of things, but it's interesting in some of the clients that I'm seeing right now, they have the answers. If you listen, because that's part of our job as mentors, is to listen. So when I get a new client and they're kind of overwhelmed, we listen. And in the hearing and the talking it through, the answer is there from our small business owner.
Right. And that's
they just can't see
value.
it. Yeah.
But that's the value in communication, is that for that time that you're communicating, they're perhaps putting that feeling of being overwhelmed aside in order to tell you their story. We all have a story,
right,
whether it's about a business, whether it's about a personal relationship. And sometimes for business, it feels even like a heavier, bigger story because it's so important. And in the telling and in the dialogue, we're able to sort through things so that a friend, a mentor, a family member can say, well, wait a minute, I heard you say this. If you know that already, you can do that. Okay, so that it gives you two parts of resilience when you do that. When that person comes to you, Jane, they're making a connection. So that's the first part of resilience. And they're communicating. And by talking to you, they are figuring out another part, which is how to problem solve, how to develop some insight. So when, let's say that you realize that there are three things that they know, okay? They can then develop the insight that says, wait a minute, even though I was feeling overwhelmed, it turned out I didn't know what to do. It gives them a perspective that they don't have sitting home alone, just feeling overwhelmed and feeling isolated.
And I think with small businesses, that's it, because you have to, you're doing everything from sweeping the floor to making a presentation for a new business. So it just becomes overwhelming. And a lot of times they'll say, oh, my husband or my wife is sick of hearing about this. So right, you're kind of stuck in your own head with all these overwhelming thoughts. So part of our mentorship is helping people just let people talk and sort it out.
And I suspect when the mentoring program was begun, that it wasn't begun thinking that this is a way to help people be more resilient. You thought about this is a way to help people in business. But in reality, you are helping them to be more resilient. And you're giving them, all 5 C's of resilience, okay? You're helping them to have more confidence. You're helping them to maintain their commitment to their business. You're helping them to see areas where they have control. So that really a mentor is a person who can help someone develop resilience, can help them enhance the resilience they have. And that's very important in these times because in COVID, people who didn't perhaps have any problems are developing some problems. And people who already had issues of any type now feel that they have bigger issues. And not just that they feel it, they do have bigger issues. So I think that the job of a mentor could almost be called a resilience coach, okay? Because I think that's really part of what you do.
And it's always beautiful for me to see that a lot of times the client, one of our clients, has the answer. It's there. The answer is there. You have it.
Right.
It's just kind of uncovering, unbundling.
Yes.
So it's
also, you're not doing it the way I would do it in my office, but it's sort of taking the emotion and saying, okay, that's over here. And then the client may be saying, I can't do X, Y, Z. That's the thought. Okay. And then in their dialogue with you, you're examining the evidence for that thought and discovering that that thought is inaccurate. They really do know what to do. So it's almost like that process of cognitive restructuring is embedded in the dialogue with the coach.
So anyway, does anybody have any quick questions? We're about at our time. I don't see anything in the chat. I don't see anything in the Q&A. So I would just remind people, I'm going to do a quick share here. Remind people to
And I would agree with that slide. Get a SCORE certified mentor today.
There you go. Go to centraljersey.score.org. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to work with you. Dr. Block's information is here as well. And I'm sure she would enjoy hearing from you as well. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I particularly want to thank Dr. Block. I think this is such an important topic for everyone, but I do know that small business owners are very impacted by all of this. And so I think you gave us some really, really excellent tips to help us.
Jane, there was a question. I don't know if you answered it. I thought I saw someone write, how can they get a recording of this?
We will put the recording up on our website at centraljersey.score.org. The recording will be on the website. Give us a couple of days to get that posted.
Okay.
Thank you. I didn't see that one.
Yeah, I think that was the only one that you had missed.
Okay.
And you can certainly also send me questions. You can go to my website and contact me through my website if you have other questions.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for being here. Good luck. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Stay safe.